I also wanted to talk a little bit more about designing software. And one of the issues, as I mentioned, is as your projects get larger, as you involve more people, as your code gets more complicated, that will become the number one factor determining whether or not you're successful in a project. I've seen this over and over again. I've been hired to come in on projects, look at their design and go, uh-oh, we need to redesign the software. Core to the design and structure of your software are these three levels that I show here. The first one is just having a script. That's pretty much what we've been doing. The first third of the semester, all we did was write scripts. In other words, we just wrote one file that had code from sort of the top down. Then we started adding functions into that code. Okay, and the basic idea here is that as you start to see you're having duplicate code, you're doing the same thing over and over again. Often that's done with file conversions, any kind of date or unit conversion, you'll end up with functions. Sometimes in more advanced programs, you'll have analysis things you do over and over again. Maybe like the land cover calculation that we did for LiDAR. You might put that into a function because then you could use that in the future in other projects. So we roll things into functions. And what that does is that simplifies our scripting code and puts the code in a function where you can reuse it over and over again. The other thing that happens is once you put in a function, you can kind of forget about it, right? It's like, oh, I've got that function that converts, minutes or miles to kilometers. Now I don't have to worry about that conversion where I just call my function. And of course, you can do that with something as simple as miles to kilometers, or you can do that with something as complicated as, full-blown system for identifying land cover, well beyond the small example of that we did in lab. You could spend years doing that and put it in one function. It'd be a big function, but still, now you can just call that one function. Okay, now the problem here is that this will still keep having this file get bigger and bigger and bigger. And once you get to about 1,000 lines in a file, it's definitely time to break it up into multiple files. And there's two ways to do that. The first way is to create what in Python is called a module. And this is simply a file with functions in it. It's just a file with a group of functions, that's it. So you literally take your functions from your script you're writing, and when your script gets too big, I do recommend looking at the function, see is there a group of functions like, oh, these are all about unit conversions, or these are all about working with shape files, or these are all about working with rasters. Take and group them together, and then you move those into a module. Now you can import this module into your script, and not only did your script get much simpler, easier to read and maintain, but now you can reuse that module on other projects. So now you have this reuse capability between scripts, but they could be in multiple projects, which is typically what happens with me. And I reuse these modules on multiple projects and different scripts. The next level of that, especially when you start to see that your functions start to group, like maybe they group around land cover, or especially this happens with graphical user interfaces, where the functions start to group with data. In other words, there's variables that you'd really like to hide within a group of functions. And that's where we get to having a module that is a file, but with a class in it. And this is where classes really come in, because in a class, we can group together functions and data that are related. And then again, we can hide them, right? We just make a module with that class. We do it once. Maybe it's a land cover class, or it's a class that does raster transforms, or a class that does network analysis. Could be any type of different spatial transforms or non-spatial. And we put it into a class, and now we can reuse it over and over again, and it's very easy to use. You've actually been already doing this with like files. When you open a file, we get back an object that tracks our file as we read or write to it. It tracks to make sure it's handling it appropriately, and of course there's a lot of different functions associated with files. So that's another advantage. You can put all these different functions in there. The PyQt library that we've used has tons of classes. Take a look at their website. You'll see there's probably hundreds of classes in there for different types of widgets. Each widget is a different class, and each time you make a widget, that creates an object from that class, and that object can have different variables within it. Like a button can have different text in it. It can have different functions that it executes when you click on it. Same thing for all the widgets. So this is something we can spend a lot more time on, but we won't get too much time. We'll just touch on it again before the semester's over. And I do recommend, again, dig more into this, especially this is all around object-oriented programming and structured design and good software development. So take a look at that down the road as you spend more of your time writing code.